Dear Jesus, I'd just like to thank you that we could all be here this morning on this beautiful day, and I thank you for our guest speaker, and just praise you for everything that has happened this week and all the blessings we receive. And
I'd like to welcome you all out today. As you just stated, I will follow you all of my days. Every one of us has the point is, you need to ask God, what is your mission? What is your job? What are you supposed to be doing for the Lord's work? Today we have a guest speaker, and I'm not going to introduce him. I'm going to introduce Nate Myers again, and Nate's going to introduce him. I understand he is a one-on-one. He likes to talk to people. Large group, he's not a professional speaker, he tells me. That's okay, neither am I. I just talk a lot. And then Nate's coming, and that changes everything. Nate, please come forward.
Hey everybody, I'm glad to be back. It's always awesome to be here. Like usually I get to speak once a year, but this is like once a month. We got to keep this going. This is awesome. I like it. I don't know if you guys do. No, so I wanted to introduce Randy. He goes like, how big is this church we're speaking at? I'm like, it's like around 2,000 plus. I don't know, not too big. I said, it's fine. It's a small church. It's a tight family. And I was explaining, I went to Pittsburgh on Friday and I seen you guys had a full parking lot. And I came back on Saturday and I seen there was a full parking lot again. I don't know what was happening, but it just warmed my heart because I know you guys are close knit, and that's family, man. That's church. So I just want to say that's awesome. And I'm super happy to see you guys living church, being the church. Also, a few things. Randy is not a professional speaker, nor am I. Something that I'm not used to doing either, so we're trying to do something a little new here, just to hit points that you guys might want to know, and if we don't hit something, then just yell out a question, raise your hand, and he'll answer you. One of the biggest things is, I know my wife and I came here to speak last month or whenever it was, and it was hard. Like, it's really hard, and he lives there. He's lived there a long time. So he hasn't seen his wife and daughter in months. So like there is sacrifice with missions work. There is sacrifice with serving the Lord. We can't forget that there's always sacrifice in serving the King of Kings. There will always be sacrifice. And he'll get to share a little bit of what that sacrifice looks like. And continuing his pursuit to be obedient to Christ. And I'm just honored to be in a position to help him and be alongside with him. And if you could give a warm round of applause for Randy Trythall.
Yeah. I'm not the most eloquent speaker. I don't do well in big crowds, so you'll have to bear with me. My name is Randy Trythall. I guess my technical term is Reverend Randall Trythall. So anyway, not that I ever use that. Most people, when they meet me, they're like, wait, you're ordained? I'm like, yeah, for years. Oh. See, I'm also technically, hey, can you put a scripture together? And this has been kind of going in my mind. So I'll probably go off on rabbit trails on this, but it kind of all pulls together. So it's Joshua 1:9. Have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Do not be frightened and do not be dismayed, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. You know, and that's an interesting. It's a really interesting scripture, because if we look at what's going on, just even here in the United States, you know, a little bit of time that I've been back, there's a lot of people who are wavering from their base. You know, Christ says that we're supposed to have our they don't have a solid foundation on what they believe in one thing or another, and as a result, they're getting pulled all sorts of different ways. And the one thing I would challenge everybody is to make sure that you're solid in what your belief system is, whatever that is. Just seek the Lord, and He'll tell you exactly what it is. And so for me, how did I get into missions? Well, I met my wife in 1997, and she was African. My wife's African, but my wife's family lineage is Amish. So I'll explain that a little bit. So my wife was born in Zambia, and she was raised there. And at 7, she was adopted by a high chief. So she is actually one of probably the only people so I'm at the Effort Affair, and I see this tall, very strong, blonde hair, blue-eyed woman standing there with my friend's girlfriend, and I'm like, wow, I got to meet her. And it was interesting though, because right away she started talking about it. It's like, well, what do you're from where? She's like, I live between Zambia and Congo. And I said, well, what are you doing here? She's like, well, we're kind of staying in the States right now because of the war that's going on in Congo. And that was kind of the end of that. So she told me different things down the road. But the thing that she taught me within that is that even if there's turmoil, unless the Lord tells you to leave, you're supposed to stay there. Stay in it and be involved in it. And that's something that's really driven home in our ministry. So like Nate said, we've been through a lot. The last 2 years since COVID hit has just been absolutely amazing and absolutely awful. When I was getting ready to, my wife and daughter went over. I was here in the States. We were here in the States. My wife and daughter went over. I want to say it was like September or November. And I needed to finish out a few things. So we figured it would be 6 to 8 weeks. And it ended up being a couple of months. And it was funny, though, because I was praying, and I'm like, Lord, what are we supposed to do in this situation? And I felt this urgency that I needed to leave in the next 3 days, which Nate can tell you, when you're prepping to go to Africa, I mean, even for a short mission, 3 days is not a lot of time to throw everything together. So, because I roll with 6 bags, so I've got equipment to get together, all these different things. So anyway, so I go over, and I know it's going to be a challenging situation when we get there. And I get there, and they tell me that I'm the last American allowed into the country. They close the border right then and there. So it's literally leaning on the Lord in situations that are going to be uncomfortable. And it was uncomfortable because I wasn't able to finish everything I wanted to do. I wasn't able to. We have a small cottage down there. I wasn't able to close it up the way I wanted to, but I left because he said to. And you do, if the Lord tells you to do it, go into it. Just make sure it's, 100% him with whatever you're doing. And I'm kind of going on a rabbit trail again. So anyway, so I got to Zambia, and then we got into lockdown. We had 6 months of lockdown that was, we lived, at that point, we were in a small property that was probably, with the house, is about the size of this room. And we basically got 6 months there. So I'm there. What we do in our ministry, I should back up a little bit. So our ministry started we got called in 2008. We started the nonprofit in 2009, and we went on the field in 2010. So our original thing that we went to do is we were going to fight childhood sex slavery that was going on in Zambia, which was rampant. So we were gung-ho. I was going to go over. We were going to find ways to kick down doors and get all these kids pulled out of the different places they were, the brothels, the slavers, all these different things. And 6 months into it, I realized that the underlying issue was not the biggest issue was not the slavery. That was just a symptom of what was going on. And when I talk about that, the symptom is a result of we've had a major AIDS epidemic in Zambia. I mean major. Probably one of the worst in the world. And it's not really talked about. So basically the late 80s to the early 2000s, we lost probably, there's no official statistics, but probably half the population within the country. So, and most of the people were over the age of 20 who died. So we have people who had children. Within the country. So what ended up happening is that so we have this huge void. So what does that look like? Well, right now we have between 50 and 60%, the statistics go back and forth, of the population is under the age of 18. Okay? And very few of those have family to take care of them. So we have this huge void, and this is the second generation of basically parentless children. So what happens? Now let me ask you, we're here. How much stuff do you guys learn from your parents, whether you realize it or not? I mean, would you say that you learn a lot of different things, different things, whether it be, it's going to sound silly, how to put butter on toast. You don't put it on there after it's cooled, usually. You put it on while it's warm because it's something you saw mom and dad do. How do you put a tea bag in there? How do you make coffee? Simple things like that. Well, think about it. If you're dropped into a situation as a little child and you have none of that rearing around there, you're feral. You learn to be able to, just like taking your, a puppy that you have or a cat and dropping them in the middle of the woods. 10 years down the road, it is not have absolutely no skills because there's nobody to teach it. So you might have somebody who's like, hey, I'm a plumber. And you're like, oh, that's great. I'm going to hire a plumber. But the reality of the situation is they don't have the polished skills. They might know that, you put the pipes together and you cut it, but, they might not know that you want to try to make it level when you go forward. That's the biggest thing when we have guys that do stuff with block, is that they can lay block and it looks pretty decent, but you put a level on it and you're like, whoa, that's going to be a fun door to try to put in there. So you got a door that looks like this. But, they try. I'll say this, Zambia's got its troubles. And you probably hear, anybody that does a Google search on the internet is going to find out that they have problems. We've got corruption. We've got other issues. But a lot of that stuff is about 5 to 10% of the population. When the reality of the situation is that the rest of the other people there, they want to improve their lives. They want to do better. They want to have something secure. needed hip boots to walk through it. And I've learned a lot from them. I've really learned a lot. And one of the stories is, so I teach organic agriculture and self-sustainability. Our goal over there is to try to help them be the best people that they can be and not have to depend on the government and other people, so that they know within a shadow of a doubt, my family or my village, we can do this and we don't need outside help. That is our goal, to try to help them help themselves. Our catchphrase, well, I shouldn't say catchphrase, or I guess our opening line is, teaching people, giving people a hand up, not a handout. One of the big things is that our organization is called Operation Helping Hand, singular. And God was very adamant on that. Why singular? Because it takes two hands to do it. If you're saying hands, we're doing all the work. And doing it together. But getting back to what I was saying, so I knew this stuff, that they needed help and they wanted help over there, and you know it in your head, but when it's actually thrown into your face, it's a different thing. So I'll tell you a story. So we're doing a conference on compost, just basics, how to improve the soil. The soil there is we've got really good organic matter. If any of you guys are farmers, you'll follow me. If not, sorry. I'll talk a lot about plants. So the soil structure is great for like a season or two, but you have to, like a battery, you have to recharge it. You got to keep adding to it. So compost is one of the easiest ways to do it. So we went through this thing, and this guy I think he was in his 30s. I don't know. He had a bunch of kids. He comes over to me, and he's like at the end of it, and he's crying. And Zambian men don't cry in public. It's just not, you just don't do that. And he's crying. Sorry, I'm not, and I'm going to cry in public. And he looks at me and he said, for the first time in my life, I know that my children won't go hungry. And it was like, wow, it was like a kick in the teeth. And I was like, I knew this, and I know it, on paper and, but rationally. But when you hear it from somebody else, it just changes you. And then I knew right then and there that this is where we were supposed to be. We do a lot of different things to try to help the people over there. The goal is to try to help them help themselves. That's the big thing. Just like, Nate and Talitha came over, and one of the things that they saw was that so what does that look like? Well, polygamy is multiple wives and a husband. Unless you live in South Africa, and that's gotten so weird, we won't even go into that conversation. But it's not like a traditional situation. Like you go to other places where there's polygamy, and the husband really loves his wives, at least, in most of the situations. So we have a lady who helps do the laundry with us, and she's what they call a third wife. So what ends up happening is the guy gets married to somebody, he pays a dowry, he has a wife, he starts a farm, it's doing well, he wants more children. Children is the biggest thing. Wealth is important, but lots of children is even more important for them. So then he's like, well, we've only had he talks to the family. And usually when you have two wives, they kind of live around, two different houses, but on the same property. And then what ends up happening is he gets kind of bored. There's this, he's in his 30s. There's this girl who's like 16 to 17. He thinks she's the wonderful thing in the world. He marries her, and then he moves to another farm. Okay, and then what ends up happening is that he spends all his time with the young wife, and then the first wife with the children, will work the farm all year. Now the kids, unlike here in the States, the kids there don't have the opportunity to be able to go out and do sports, because when they get home from school, they're working the land. So what ends up happening is they do that, and then the dad comes for 4 to 6 weeks out of the year. He takes probably 95% of the crop and leaves, just enough for them to barely make through. And this is what happens over there. So instead of it being a wife, it basically ends up being she's a slave. The first and second wife are slaves. The third wife, the newest wife, is usually the prized one who has all the choice things. You know, she can eat whatever she wants. She can do all the different things. And the father's not there to raise the children. So one of the big things that I try to do is I try to be an example with when we're working in the community of what it is to be a father. You know, to be there with your children, to keep them in line, to show them skills and things of that nature. So, I mean, that's a struggle that we work with. I mean, there's lots of different struggles that we work with in Zambia. Hold on, I got some other things on something else. But I'm kind of getting lost in my own thoughts. I apologize. So, and that's going to take. Zambia is an extremely complicated place. It is not for the faint of heart to go into missions. You know, Nate talks about going to Romania is where missionaries go to die spiritually. And there's a lot of that with Zambia. I mean, especially when you work in the bush, it will, if you're not built for it, it'll eat you alive. I mean, in this year we've had to deal with lockdown. We've had a tank stand, which is all of our water is pumped up into a tank stand, so we have water pressure in the house. Tank stand collapsed. We don't really have any electricity. We have no running water in the house. You know, for us to to have a shower, we've got to boil water on the stove, and then we've got a bucket that's got a I don't know where this came from, but one of the guys came up. It's a keg tap to turn it on and off. It works, but just still how it showed up there, because we're 26 miles in the bush and there's no bars around with a keg anywhere. But you know, I say all this it was funny because when Nate was coming over, Nate and Talitha were coming over, like, oh, we go off-roading. You know, we understand what it's like. And it was funny to see the look on Nate's face after we drove back to the mission. He just looked at me, he goes, wow, you really have bad roads. You know, it was just, it was really funny. But I mean, we have different things there. We've got corruption. I mean, like the one story I talk about a lot, which Nate probably gets frustrated with me bringing up, is we were going out of I was picking them up, and we had all sorts of complications. We had bearings go out in the trailer. We had lights go out. And, you know, here it's a run to Home Depot or, you know, Tractor Supply, you know, that's an afternoon thing. There it's a 2-day process just to find the parts and then to find somebody who knows what they're doing to be able to put it in. But anyway, I'm getting off on a tangent. So we're driving through town and we have checkpoints in Zambia where they just check to make sure you're legal. They check your vehicle to make sure that you got inspection, registration, insurance, all that stuff. So we're going through there and there's an immigration checkpoint and they love to pull over white people. They just love to find out if you're legally in the country. And my paperwork we've had problems with my paperwork the last year. Nothing on my part. It's rules that they're changing. They're always changing the goalposts. You're like, hey, we're here. And they're like, nope, it's here. It's here. Anyway, we get there. They pull me out and they're holding us up and we're there, I don't know, probably an hour at that point. And I come back to Nate and I go, hey, I think I'm getting arrested. It'll be okay. Here are the keys you need to drive to the mission. Nate's been in Zambia 3 days at this point, and he's driving on the other side of the road with a trailer that is completely overloaded. His eyes got that big. And he goes, he's doing this. Yeah, okay, whatever it needs to be. You know, inside he's going, ah! You know, and he just looked, I mean, later on, he was like, how come you were so calm in that? I'm like, look, this is where God's called us. If this is what has to happen in that situation, you just have to be content with it. And there's a lot of things over there that would drive most people crazy. You know, you tell somebody to be there at 10 o'clock, they'll show up at 1. You know what I mean? What are you going to do? You're going to scream at them? Well, I mean, it's a cultural thing. It's not, especially when you're in the bush. Time is fluid. Say it that way. And a schedule is fluid. But I will say this. Say if you're driving back that road and you get stuck, like we got stuck, really stuck. And we had 4 different groups of people stop to try to help pull us out. They didn't even know us. You know, and just to lend a helping hand, because they want the idea that in their mind is that the person they're helping will hopefully be able to help somebody else down the road. Value here in the United States for a long time. That was our values. And more, and I'm not trying to slam the United States, but more and more it's about self and not about what's your neighbor doing, what are they going through, how can I help them, how can I be better in this community, how can I build up what's going on. But I mean, it was just, it's been incredible. I mean, I changed from being a very selfish individual, self-centered, task-oriented individual to a relationship-oriented individual. And as we're pursuing the kingdom, that's where we need to be. I mean, stuff is important, don't get me wrong. And keeping the roof over your head is important, but the critical thing is the relationship with Christ and the relationship with the people around you. You know, I mean, if we go through life and we have millions of dollars in the bank and we don't know who our neighbor is or what their how do we explain that? Go, well, you know, I made stuff and I left it for my kids. Great, that's wonderful, but what did you do for the least of me? You know, and we have to do more of that. I mean, I was a very angry, bitter individual. You know, to give you a little bit of a background, you know, I was not a good person. You know, I was a drug dealer, you know, and I used to go when people would stiff me, I would break their bones. I was notorious with breaking people's hands because every time they used the bathroom, they would remember what they owed me. I was a cruel, nasty individual. And the reality of the situation is in my life, I was looking for something to fill this void inside of me. You know, it's like I use it, you know, like when you're a little kid, you've got those toys and there's like a triangle and there's a square and, you know, you see your kid sitting there like, it's not fitting through. Well, I was doing that. I was trying to find something that fit it. I was trying to put a square peg in a Jesus hole. And that was the reality of the situation. And I see more of that over there is that I see people who don't have discipleship. There's a lot of people who have come to Christ. I mean, I'm not trying to knock crusades, but we have a lot of situations where people come through and they're like, hey, Jesus loves you. Come to the Lord. Here's your Bible. Cheers. You know, they're out. You know, and that's great. But that's just the thimble thing. I mean, for me, I became a Christian when I was 15, and I did all of this horrible stuff until I was 21, and somebody said, hey, you do realize what you're doing is bad, and it's a sin, and God is not going to bless you for these things. And I'm like, no, actually, no one has said that to me. And that's where the boldness in the situation is when we have these conversations, you know, as we go forward and we need to have conversations where we come up to people privately, not publicly, and say, hey, do you realize what you're doing is hurting yourself and your eternal salvation? I mean, I think that we're so focused on here that we don't get the idea of there, you know, the afterlife. And I really believe that needs to be something that we critically look at as we go forward. And I'm bouncing all over the place. Sorry, guys. My brain's a little fuzzy too. I'm still recovering. I gotten COVID on the plane ride in, and I still have major lung issues. I just got I just got told that my heart issues finally stopped, but I mean, I've got pneumonia in two lungs for over 2 months, and oxygen level doesn't do well. Low oxygen levels doesn't do well with cognitive ability, so I apologize. But no, I'm passionate about what we're doing in Zambia. I'm passionate to see people trying to do things in their community and to stand up for what's right in a godly way. And when I say a godly way, what's the first thing Jesus said? He said, you need to love your neighbor as yourself, and then you need to love him as the only God, basically, in our life. I'm paraphrasing and doing a poor job of it. So what does that look like? So when we go for correction, when I go for correction with people over there, I do it. If I can't come up with, and don't get me wrong, I'm not perfect in this. I'm not as flawed as it comes. I look at it and I go, okay, can I do this in love? Can I get the point across in a way that they're going to be understanding of it and open? And it's kind of like, if I can't, like, I kind of have this like a rose, like a glasses that I look through that. And if I can't see it through love, I pull back, I look at it, and I try to figure out different ways. Now, don't get me wrong, there's times where I get heated and I just, and then you're just sort of asking God to forgive you. But I mean, that's the one thing I would challenge in this. In all these struggles, going back to Joshua, have I not commanded you, be strong and courageous, do not be frightened, and do not be dismayed, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. So we need to be bold in it, but we need to be bold in love as we go forward. And I know you probably have questions.
I do.
So I'll shut up. Yeah, go ahead. Like I said, I'm not the speaker. My wife's the extrovert. I'm the introvert. I'd rather sit in the corner and read. But I know that this is a necessity, because the people that I am working with would come and speak openly with you guys. So I need to step out of my comfort zone and be willing to do that.
So I can do 3 questions in one.
Go ahead.
How can we come alongside you to help is one of the main questions that I get. Where do the funds go? And
Oh, we party all the time. No, I'm just kidding. Okay, I'm going to start with the first answer. I mean, how can people, if they're looking to come alongside with us, what does that look like? Well, we have a couple of different ways. People can come alongside. The easiest one is financial. I shouldn't say easy. That takes a commitment, and that takes away from what you're going to do different things. But financially, on a monthly basis, is one way. Teams, we need help. We inherited a property. Whoops. See, this is why I'm not good with technology. Nobody lets me have new things. So, I mean, one of the other things is that we inherited a property. So we've got 250 hectares, which is roughly, I want to say, 650, 700 acres. And there's 11 buildings on it. However, the individual who built the property did not put a foundation on any of the buildings. So after 20 years, and didn't fire the bricks. So after 20 years, things turning back to mud, and walls are falling out and things of that nature. So we're trying to build property, build buildings. We want to build a communal bathroom, things of that nature. So teams, we need help. We need people to come over who are skilled, to come and work alongside with Zambians to be able to do that. So you can show them. And we just need, just general help in that aspect. And the other thing is this, we really need a lot of prayer. The area that we work in is huge with black magic. We have witch doctors who would like us to burn in hell, literally. We have major spiritual attacks that happen all the time. The thing is that you don't really know who the witch doctor is. I'm getting a feeling I know who the one guy is there. But we need prayed up. We need people to pray regularly for us and what we're doing in the property, and that we are safe. That's a huge one. And what was your second question on that? Where do the funds go? Okay, where do the funds go? Well, so I'll let you know. I'll just be so out there. So before COVID, our support was $5,000 to $6,000. For staff, our food, half of the money goes to fuel, well, at least, sometimes even more, because it's a haul. I mean, when we have to go to get different supplies, it's a 6-hour run. So, I mean, it's a full day run. It goes to infrastructure, it goes to Bible teaching. You know, one of the big things is we do a lot of one-on-one, which I'm good at, if you haven't noticed. Better at than this. But we do a lot of one-on-one. We do Bible studies, things of that nature. I mean, pretty much every nickel goes into doing where we're at. And we feel so part of what we're supposed to. Yeah, we feel that what we're doing is so important that, you know, when the support dropped, we used up all of our savings to keep everything going in this last 2 years. And if anybody asks, we can show them on paper, this is where it is. And we have no problem with that. We want to be as transparent as possible. I don't want to be like, hey, thanks for the check, see you guys. You know, I don't want that. I want there to be accountability from our standpoint, because that's what needs to be. Anyway, go ahead.
So realistically, there's two questions that I have that get asked a lot. What does the long term look like, and what is a realistic, like a monthly income that you need to run?
Are you talking about financial for the long
financially.
for the long term,
Is that like a
or
lot of
what we're
questions?
doing? Okay. Financially for the long term, well, I'll just talk about with the short term. The short term for us, what's happened in this last year is we've had a shift in government just in the last month, but before that, we've had a very corrupt government running everything over there. So in the 2 years, things have tripled in price. So that's just been really, really tough. So things are a lot more expensive. With COVID going on, we also don't have the availability to get things regularly. So say we go in, I have a few medications that I have to take. Nothing major, but just to keep me healthy and going forward. So when we go in, we don't know when we're going to have those meds again. So we have to buy 6 months to a year right then and there while the supply is available, because the shipping is really screwed up from it. And they've closed the borders multiple times. And the only way we get things in is it's either shipped up from South Africa. You know, you have a boat come into South Africa and then it's driven up. Or the boat goes into Tanzania, into Dar es Salaam, and then it's driven down. Zambia is a landlocked country. Some things come in by plane, but not much. We have very little freight that comes in, except high-end stuff. So when those borders are closed, even if the stuff is on the way, you don't know when it's going to come. I mean, it's been a lot of that way. So when we go to town, we try to, my wife only goes to town every 2 to 3 weeks in the dry season. And during the rainy season, we go to town probably every 4 to 6 weeks. Of course, that is almost a week process because the roads are so bad. So just to give you an idea, so to go the 26 miles, it takes me an hour and a half to drive that, to get to Macadam. And then from there, we have roughly a 4.5 hour drive to the largest city on Macadam. So it's difficult. So in the rainy season, it roughly takes 2.5 to 3 hours to get into town, to, when I say town, to where Macadam is. And then, it takes a lot more time. So usually it takes a whole day in the rainy season for us to just get to the area. We usually we try to get a cheap place to stay for the night. Mud and muck at dark, because you get stuck and then you're in there overnight. Nobody's coming by. So, minimum 3-day process. Did I answer what you asked? Okay. Well, oh yeah, financial. So, I mean, the goal that we need to do is that on my trip being home, we need to we need to get support, monthly support of $3,000 a month. I got to get, whether that be people giving $5 a month or $1,000 a month, whatever that looks like, for us to be able to keep things going. For us to be at a healthy place where we can start rehiring staff, we need to be closer to $8,000 a month. That's the long term. Other questions? Well, does anybody have any questions about what it's like to live in Africa? You know, what we do over there specifically, you know, anything. I mean, just shoot. Anybody from the hip.
Are there any other missionaries in your village, or is it just your?
No, we're the only ones. There's no other white people for probably 20 miles. And we, like I said, we live off grid, solar. We have a windmill that pumps.
20 miles. I don't think they get the concept of what that looks like. I mean, there's probably a few.
Okay, so realistically, it's not actual distance, but it's basically like the next white people we see are in Pittsburgh. So if you have an idea of that concept, that's how hard it is to get around to it. And most of them are South African farmers. So you have situations where you have people who are wallowing in sin, you know, alcoholics who are farmers. So even with that, but yeah.
When you say about this acreage,
Yes.
do you use that do you give it to families, or how does that, do they?
Okay, so what we do is we farm a bunch of it ourselves. So if say you were going to come and 3 other people were going to come to our program, what we do is we usually give them a half an acre, and they will raise. We go through what it is to raise different vegetables and things of that nature, soil structure. It takes a while. You know, in the past we've only been able, because I end up having to do so many other hats, we've only been able to do 3-month programs. But our goal is to try to get it to an 18-month program where we go through everything on how to do it. So, and then they can take the food from that and go home with it. 50 by 50, and that they can grow stuff so that 1, they can supplement to help their family, and 2, they get knowledge of how to be able to do this. That's something that we've talked about, because we have a windmill that pumps water, so we have access to water year round, where most people do not. They'll have to get water from the river, which has giardia in it and liver fluke. And I don't know if you guys know what liver fluke does to cattle and things of that nature, but it's really, really bad. It's a parasite that attacks the kidneys and the liver, and the animal dies slowly. It doesn't absorb things, and it's just really awful to watch. And people get that, and they'll get a different level of it, and then you'll meet people who have horrible problems that are slowly dying until they get some sort of an anti-parasitic. So that's their water source in the dry season. But for us to be able to we have 2 wells, and we put a 3rd well in up at the school. And this 3rd well sits on an aquifer. So our goal is to work with them, because we gave in the dry season so that we can try to help the people in the community. So to answer your question, yes, we do that when they're in the program. If they don't, and we're doing a program and they live close by, we'll actually help them. I'll go out and help them. We use a technique between Farming God's Way and the Back to Eden project. It's kind of a mesh between them. It's a no-till way, because we try to keep the natural enzymes alive on the top part of the soil so that it helps feed all the different things. I'm getting into too much science, sorry. I'm a plant geek. Plants are what I do. And helping people try to be able to take care of themselves. But our goal is always to try to help people. Now, we have 35 acres that's cleared that we're going to plant. We're hoping to plant this season. I don't know get back, and it's almost impossible to do stuff then. But we're going to try to do the 35 acres in sunflower because for a couple of different reasons. So we have different animals, and the pack, after it's compressed and you take the oil out of it, is really good for putting fat on different animals like pigs, and if you've got layer chickens, and especially broilers. And then we raise turkeys. We do chicken, we do layers. We've done broilers, and we're going to do broilers again. Rabbits is something we're hoping to do when I get back. Just a lot of different things. Our goal is to be, for us as an individual, we would like to, if finances provide, to be able to be, at least with food, 80% self-sufficient within a year. So we have different guards. Go ahead. Okay, so the main staple in Zambia is something called nshima. And some people love it, some people hate it. So basically what it is it's maize or corn. Cream of wheat or grits, but it's cooked down until it's a stiff paste. Okay, so it looks like mashed potatoes, and they eat, in the bush especially, they eat with their hands. So I'm pretty good at it, but a lot of other people, like somebody we know, got it everywhere. He was like, forget this, and I'm going to eat this way, and everybody laughed. But so they do that. That is their main staple. And then they have something that they call relish. Okay, and it's not like what we would consider. Relish is something that they use, rape, which is what we use here as a cover crop, our green manure in the United States. But over there, they use it to eat. It's kind of like a cabbage, but it's not exactly. They use Chinese cabbage. If you're lucky, spinach. I prefer it when it's with spinach because it just tastes wonderful. Tomatoes, onions. And then if you have somebody who is a really good gardener, they have hot peppers they call piri piri. Okay, and let them put it in yourself, because it's hot. It's really hot. And it's bland food. And that's the bulk of what they eat, just like that. And then every once in a while, you'll have, every week or every 2 weeks, they might have chicken. They may have an egg here and there. After the rainy season, they usually have beans, but that usually teeters off after about 5-6 months, because either the bugs get them, the rats get them, or they've eaten them all. So it's a tough situation. You don't see people in the bush eating. Every once in a while you'll see them eat goat. Every once in a while, like if there's a funeral or something like that, they'll butcher a goat. But not a lot of protein. And as a result, you'll see people that are stunted, and you'll see their hair is like an orangish color. And that's basically, especially with the kids, is that their body is absorbing whatever minerals it can so their fingernails will be messed up, their teeth will be messed up, and so will their hair. Malnutrition, one of the even though we have a lot of natural resources, they have the third largest producer. They're the third largest producer in the world of copper. But it's tough. Going back to the education, how do kids who don't know anything go out and farm? They have no knowledge. Their idea is, I'm going to dig a hole, stick the seed in, and woohoo, in 6 months it's going to, that's not how it works. There's, it takes tending. Plants are a lot like a child. It's sped up, not like a child over an 18-year period, but you have to nurture it. You have to work with it. It's just like our walk with faith. You become a Christian, you sprout, okay, and then you need this nurturing. And then there's different times you got to go through and you got to prune things off that are bad about yourself, and then you go forward, and then it starts to bloom, and then you need to, give it different things at that point, and then, you get ready for harvest, and then the whole thing starts over again. So, yeah. Anybody else have any questions?
You mentioned about your wife's background,
Mm-hmm. were the original Amish who came over at the first break-off. So my wife is as German as it comes with her lineage. Stolzfus, Heil, Gettel, Fischer. So her maiden name was Fischer. So her grandfather was an Amish, high Amish bishop, a very pious individual. Great guy, but I mean, he was very strict. You know, you did it this way or you went away. But she still has a lot of aunts and uncles who are Amish. I have a tendency to get in trouble when I go to the family reunions because I hang out with her one uncle, Uncle Amos. He will do things to make me laugh when they're having quiet prayer. And then they look at me and they go, "Oh, you bring the English here. I see how it is." You know, but I get along really well with them. They understand what I'm trying to do. I shouldn't say I'm trying to do, what we're trying to do and the importance of it. So they have a lot of respect for me and I have a lot of respect for them. And I'm like, "Yes, I have my knives." He goes, "We got a 500-pound pig out there that needs cleaning up." So, you know, we'll go out and he and I'll talk for hours and we'll butcher up pigs. You know, he does like boxes where they'll have like some meat, vegetables and stuff like that. Co-op is what he does. But he always needs help and I'm pretty fast with a knife because, you know, when you live in the bush and everything you eat is live, at that point you get pretty good at it because if not, it'll take forever. You know, very few times where, I shouldn't say that, when we go for beef, I don't do any butchering our beef. We get that, but everything else we butcher a lot of it. So, but anyway, so about my wife. So my wife was born in Zambia and grew up in Congo. My mother and father-in-law became missionaries in 1963 is when they went out on the mission field. My father-in-law got called to northern Rhodesia, and my mother-in-law was called, they were single at this time, to southern Rhodesia. And they lived through the war that was going on there. My mother and father-in-law ran hospitals and clinics all over Africa, mostly in Zambia, Zimbabwe, and Congo. And they did that for 53 years until my mother-in-law died. No, she was a pistol. My mother-in-law was the nicest person in the world unless she didn't like you. And then it was always against the grain. She was a hard woman. But she was my best friend and we got along great and probably one of my biggest confidants. And I miss her horribly. She was incredible. And her whole point was about to be where the Lord wanted you to be no matter what. And she would encourage me because it's not easy on the mission field, you know, especially when you live out in the bush. You're an island. You don't have other people who are sophisticated that you can go, you know, today was just, and Joe came in again and asked about the boots, you know. I mean, there's things that you want to just be able to vent to people and you don't. Nate has become that person lately because internet's been pretty good, but I mean, it's tough. I mean, you're out there and you're completely, like I said, you're an island on your own. You're constantly giving that where people are going to die. You know, I mean, I remember the second week I was in Africa going to the mission field and I'm all, you know, yeah, America, you know, I'm got that whole, you know, I'm ready to do everything. And this person comes at 3 o'clock in the morning into the living room of my mother and father-in-law's house with this child who has malaria and is not moving. And my mother-in-law looks at me, she pulls me in the other room, she goes, "The baby's going to die." And I'm like, "What?" And she's like, "The baby's going to die." She said, "But we're going to go in and we're going to do everything we can to help them so that we can give the family hope." And I'm like, here's this like 9-month-old child. And I'm just like, you know, I'm a dad. My kids are at that time were 6 and 11, and I just lose it. And I'm like, "I'll be right back," you know, and lose it in the other room. You know these things are going on, but until it's right in your face, it's not easy. I mean, you know, I think Nate Talley got that the one time we went to the pizza place. We work with a lot of street kids in one of the other towns. We went to this pizza place. I warned him. I said, "Hey, it's going to be hard to see this." About it. Now, because one of the reasons is because for us is that we try not to just do handouts. They need to feel value in it. If it's a handout, then I am always going to be, for lack of a better word, the candy man. I'm going to be the ATM. But so it's hard to pull back on your emotions and go, I can't do this in it. Now, don't get me wrong. There are times where God prompts us to do it, but that hit Tally especially really, really hard. I mean, she was just like broken, and she's like, I can't believe this. We need to go back and do something. And I'm like, I said, we start feeding those 30 kids and we'll have 150, 200 kids there. And then they'll start fighting for the food and all the different things. So to be able to see that situation and then walk away from it is really, really tough. I got another story I want to tell you real quick because it's kind of in my head. So we were teaching organic ag. I was doing a program up in the Wancho, which is one of the areas that we used to live. And, most of the people in the program were 18 to like maybe 30. And this one guy, Levy, comes in. Levy is in his mid to late 60s. I never got quite an age, but he was at least 65, maybe 67, which is like double the expectancy of life there. And going to die, in the next year or two. This is me and my American viewpoint. I'm like, we need to get him out of here to have somebody else there. So anyway, we're about 2 weeks into the program, and he invites us out to his farm. And, you go there, he's on title deed, which means he owns his land. He's got a house, a really nice house with couch in there, furniture, beds up off the floor. Most of the places over there, mattresses are on the floor if they have mattresses. He's got electric into the house, which blew my mind. I was like, because we didn't have electric. So, here's a guy who's coming to our program who's got electric. And then he's got a piggery, and, he's got nice big gardens. And I'm like, I'm losing it in my mind going, this guy is taking advantage of us. I'm thinking that. But I'm like, okay, I'm just going to see. And then I just sort of walk up to him. And afterwards, I said, not afterwards, but maybe a couple weeks down the road, I'm like, Levy, why do you come here? I said, you've always got it figured out. I said, you're doing better than we are. I said, why do you come to the program? I said, you do this. He said, yeah, but everything I've done, I've had to break my back and scrape and save to be able to do. I said, okay, what's wrong with that? He goes, no, you don't understand. Everything you teach me, everything you teach me, I go home and I teach my kids and my grandkids. It wasn't about him. It wasn't about what he could learn. He wanted, and I said, well, what does that look like? He goes, I wanted my kids to not have to struggle the way I did. I want them to learn how to do it the right way. And I was just like, sorry. It really just said a lot. He got it. He got it in a way that I couldn't tell anybody else. How important it is to empower your children with knowledge that they can take care of themselves for the future. Anyway, sorry, some mess here. Anybody else have a question?
What about language? Do you speak the language? How's that work?
I do speak some of the language. So, okay, Zambia, as a country, is an English-speaking language. Okay, however, we have 72 different tribal languages within it. So my wife speaks Bemba, English, French, Kiswahili, Swahili. I'm missing them. No, kind of Tonga. She speaks Tonga, and I'm missing something else. But I speak bad English. And that's, I speak some Bemba. I understand it. So long story short, I got typhoid in 2011, and I have brain damage as a result. It's one of the reasons why you'll see me hesitate when I'm talking. The stuff comes to my brain quick, but the mouth doesn't want to move that fast. So at that point, I used to know Spanish, Italian, Bemba, and Tonga, along with English. The neat thing is that the people there do not get irritated. They might giggle if you say stuff wrong, but they're not nasty with you. And people will come up to you and they'll try to help you learn the right way to say it, which is so cool because when I went to Italy, man, no. Or France was even worse when I tried to, years ago, had to go there. Just to give you a background, my mom was an international dance examiner. So as a little kid, I went all. As an adult, I realized it prepared me to go on the mission field to be able to understand cross-cultural. So, but yeah, no, I mean, it's neat. The language barrier is very difficult out in the bush. Now where we work, it's Bemba, Tonga, and Lenji are the languages that we work with. So as we get ready, one of the things we're trying to do is we're trying to get solar-powered audio Bibles. We want to get them in English, Bemba, and Tonga. No, in Lenji. I forget. It's one of the two. They only have, because they only have one and not the other, or we'd have all four on there. But anyway, any other questions? Come on, you got to ask crazy things. Most people ask, hey, what's the weirdest thing you've ever eaten? Caterpillars. So, there's a lot of different things. My wife is very gifted in being able to do coursework. So she will break down, she'll take a part of the Bible, and she'll take several days and pray and sometimes fast about it on how she's supposed to do it. And God will sometimes usually give, when she takes that time, he'll give her 3 or 4 different things. But we also use a lot of what we use, especially with the kids, is there's a program called 5Fish. Something you can download onto your phone. It's absolutely incredible. And there's so many different Zambian languages in there. So we can do, and they do, there's cartoons that have kids stories. I mean, things that really engage them where they're like, oh my gosh, it's, like we were kids, Saturday morning cartoons. Well, at least when I was a kid. That was what I looked forward to during the week. But so no, it's just the thing is this, is that we try to find something that's going to engage them in a way that they will understand and appreciate. There's a lot of theological stuff that we can stick in front of them, but it's just like, for them, it's like reading paint. So it's trying to do that. I mean, that's one of the things with the organic agriculture program. As I go through that, I talk to them about who Christ is, what he did for us, what the salvation, I go through the whole thing on it over a 3-month period. And I just, I get excited about it. They'll ask questions, we have conversations and things of that nature. The other thing that we do a lot of is that we I tried to do a structured Bible study, and that, it went well, but people didn't really want to come. So then we switched to doing what I call a round robin discussion. So basically, I would start out, and we would say we're reading from John. We get so far with John, and then Nate decides that he wants to take on the next thing. And then what we do is that we read it, we talk about it, and then we ask each other, well, what is it saying to you in here? And there are some situations that I have to go, yeah, that's not it, but let's pull it back. But you get some pretty cool perspectives because you've got Randy, who's from a first world country, okay? You've got Bob, who is from the city, who is coming out just to go to the Bible study. And then you've got Elijah, who is one of the villagers, who is 30. And then you've got Bonda, who is in his late 60s. So you get all of these different perspectives, and it's incredible. It's like having 15 different pastors do different sermons with you. I get goosebumps talking about it. It's done a huge thing for my walk with Christ because I'm looking at things in different perspectives. So constantly, and each time we have these meetings, we have these wonderful perspectives, and you're just like, Now, there are some times you're just like, yeah, that is totally not what's being said. We need to wind that back. But that's very few. But it's usually the individual who is running that day. So we all own the Bible study. It's not big white guy in charge, because I want to know that if I get sick, or I have to go back to the States, or God calls me off the field, that program is going to continually go forward. If I am always the person standing up there and doing all the stuff, when I'm gone, they'll be like, well, I guess it's not going on. That's where we see with a lot of organizations that there are 2 people who do everything, And then when they leave, it all dies. I mean, that's what happened with my mother and father-in-law. I hate to say it, you know, all those years of service, they didn't really train up people. So our goal is always to train people up. My goal is to train the person who will take over for me. I mean, that is the huge thing, is that because I don't want what God has built there to fall apart just because I'm out of the picture. You know, I know if 16 different buildings, building projects and going on, and all these different businesses and everything like that. He got in a car accident and died. And as a result, it is all, I mean, that place is impoverished now. I mean, he died 3 years ago because he wasn't training up people to be able to take the baton for the next generation. And that's the one thing I would ever say, is that whatever you get involved in for the Lord, make sure that you're trying to impart into somebody else who could step in and do what you're doing next. Now, it might take 10 years to train that individual, but that is the whole thing, is that, you know, we spread the gospel through can't say the right word, but basically through multiplication. You know, one person speaks to one person, who speaks to 5 people, who speaks to 10 people, who speaks to 20 people. I mean, that's the big thing. You know, another thing I wanted to also tell you why Zambia is so important for us to invest to. You know, we're losing the battle, and I'll say it that way, all over the world for the church, with the church. You know, what's going on in Zambia is that we have Muslims coming in who are Muslim missionaries, and they're coming in with $2 to $10 million in their pocket, and they're starting businesses. They're going up and they're like, hey, Nate. They look at what I call the influencers. There's always somebody in a crowd that after everything's done, a bunch of people will go to that individual and they'll talk to them. They're usually not the person that's in charge, and they're not usually somebody, you know, but there's always an influencer, as I call them. So what they do is they go to these different events, they find out who that influencer is within that community, and they go, hey, Nate, how'd you like a job? Oh, great. You know, they give them a job. You know, Nate, you know how important family is? Important. Yeah. Our culture's that way too. You know, they get into a relationship with them, they figure out what their needs are, and they figure out a way to help them. If the people haven't already asked them about Islam, they say, hey, you know what? Let's go have that conversation over at the mosque. And they've already met the imam, who's their priest, you know, and at that point it's you know, why wouldn't they? Somebody's discipling them and really living and pushing into their lives in ways that they want to see. And this is what we fight against. And people are like, what's the biggest thing that we need in the mission field? I said, we need people and we need money. And we need prayer, which I said earlier. And they said, why? I said, because we're losing traction because we don't have that. They're coming in extremely organized, and they're patient, which is, a lot of missionaries are like, I'm doing 2 years. When they go, they're signing on to 15 years, if not the rest of their life. You know what I mean? And people are like, all my friends are like, when you retire and when you coming home? I'm like, dude, we just started. We're just digging in. I said, this is what God has called me to do for the rest of my life. And they're like, but man, all the hardships and stuff like that. I'm like, have you ever read about Joseph in the Bible? Have you ever read about Job? I'm like, what do you mean? I was like, you want to talk about challenges? I mean, I've never had my family killed. I said, and I was sold into slavery. You know, I said, you look at the Gospels and you see all the different people who were martyred and how they were. I'm like, yeah, it's bad, but it ain't that bad. I've got a roof over my head, food on my table as we go forward. Anyway, anybody else have any other questions? One more?
How did the water wells get established?
How did what?
Water wells.
We paid to have the company come out and drill the well. That's how we did. And one of them that we're having problems with right now wasn't cased right. So the other ones have been cased really, really well. But it's not cheap. You know, here it's rather inexpensive. To put a well in there is between $8,000 and $14,000. That's just the well. It's nothing else. And then you've got ways to pump it out and things of that nature. What is the biggest challenge, probably one of the biggest challenges doing an agricultural program. But it's also the most rewarding, especially in a situation where families aren't able to have access to fresh water. They like being able to come in and then you can talk to them. You know, hey, how's your life? How are things going on? How's the family? You know, you can really get involved in the community that way. So that's kind of cool. And other people, I've just found this out, that other people in the community who have wells charge people to come in, which I just think is terrible. It's like you're not charging, it doesn't cost you anything. I mean, I know it costs you the upfront money to put the well in, but it doesn't cost you anything after that. You know, especially for us, we've got a windmill. But yeah, that's how we did. Any questions that you're like dying to say, especially the younger people? Come on, somebody. Okay, well, anyway, I've been kind of long-winded and all over the things. The point I would say is this, is that whether you get involved with what we're doing, which we would love, or you get involved with somebody else, or you have missionaries in your life, just remember, there's a lot of times where they're lonely. They're out there doing what the Lord wants to do, but they're doing it on their own. So, you know, a phone call to them, a care package a couple times a year, letters is an encouragement. You know, I know my wife, when we get Christmas cards, I mean, she cries because she knows that people are thinking about her. Now, we continue to move forward whether we have that or not, but it's critical to have the support around us. You know, we don't have, you know, Nate said to me, he was like shocked, you know, when I came to the States, going to SALT had been the third actual but we're not allowed to, you know, with lockdown and all sorts of different things. And that human interaction is a huge thing, just hanging out with people, listen to what other people have to say, have somebody else. It's so nice to be able to sit in a sermon and have somebody else do that, and you're just like, wow, you know, you're absorbing it. Instead of having to go and figure out sermons and different things as you go forward. But just, you know, if you have missionaries in your life, just reach out to them in a way that you haven't before. You know, something, anything. I mean, just even a little postcard makes their day. You know, hey, thinking about you, I appreciate what you're doing, things of that nature. And if God's calling you to get into missions and you want to talk, I'm here. You know, or anybody wants to learn more about what we're doing, because I kind of jumped all over the place and didn't go into a lot of detail on certain things. You know, I'm available. I'll be here in town for at least a month, probably. And I just ask you to continue to pray for Zambia. You know, we just had an election, and it looks like it's going to be a good thing. And we're praying that this president is going to be a godly man and get rid of the corruption that's going on in the country and make things better. And then pray for my family. I haven't seen my wife since May, my wife and daughter since May. And I'm praying that I can get back in November. So at that point, it'll be 6 months since we've seen each other. So just pray that we can do that. So with that, I'll hand it back over to whoever. Thank you.
I say that's pretty informative for someone who's not a public speaker. Well, we're very blessed just to have you here today. And this isn't for you, Randy, but I know you're going to look at it and you're going to take part of it. This is for our congregation, and I would like to think